Hello, my name is Kara Hutchinson, and I am an educational consultant with CET in Cincinnati. I'd like to thank you for joining us today for Digital Learning Day 2020. Today we're going to look at makerspaces in an elementary setting. So for those of you that aren't familiar with what a makerspace is, a makerspace is essentially a place where students can come and explore their interest without being focused on an outcome. So they're not required to have an end product. It's more a place where the exploration piece is the most important part. So we want to build those skills of creativity and collaboration and problem solving. So today I'm going to share with you my top 5 things to consider when you are thinking about setting up an elementary makerspace. Now, my background, I've taught preschool through 6th grade in some form or subject of another, and I actually set up a makerspace in an elementary library for grades K through 6. So I'm kind of sharing with you what I wish I would have considered, some of the things I did consider, and so I've chosen my top 5, so we're going to look at those today. So let's get started. So number 1 is don't feel like you need all of the stuff before you ever start your makerspace. This one is really, really important, and I feel like a lot of people get hung up on this one because they think that they have to have a 3D printer, or they think they have to have codable robots, or they think they have to have all of those things before they could ever think about having a makerspace for their students to be a part of. That is not the case. You could start a makerspace with some toilet paper tubes and some pipe cleaners and see where it takes you. So this number 1 is one of the most important things, and number 5 is my other most important thing, so we'll get there. But don't feel like you have to have all of the tech pieces, because a makerspace is not about necessarily technology. Is technology a part of it? Yes. But it doesn't have to all be technology based. And some of those low-tech pieces will take the kids places that you never thought were possible. And I've talked to teachers that have makerspaces of their own that sometimes something as simple as a puzzle is the one thing that not only did the kids love the most, but it was the one thing that taught them how to work cooperatively with others, because it was something they had to be okay with someone else adding to, someone else finishing, because it was a leave out all the time project. It wasn't I'm in here for 30 minutes, I'm going to work on this puzzle, and before I leave I'm going to clean it up and go. So sometimes you have these revelations when you're in your own space. Number 2 is consider your where. Now, this one is really dependent on where you are and what your building looks like, what your vision is for this space. If you're thinking of just starting a makerspace in your classroom, great. But consider that space where, the kids have enough room to kind of spread things out. Where do you not mind it looking messy and not having to worry about, putting everything away after they're finished? Do you have enough outlets available in case you do have things that need to be charged? Do you have recycling bins and space for tubs that you're going to store things in? That where piece is really important, and sometimes you just work with what you have, and that's fine too. So me creating it in a library, I had to consider okay, obviously the books are in their own space. What other spaces do I have that are conducive for, movement and talking and like kids working together, leaving things out? Is there enough space, floor space for them to be able to spread out and have plenty of space to work? All of those things are really important, and something that I was really thankful I had were I had a couple tables that had massive tabletop space, and it ended up, being great because sometimes you needed a harder surface than the carpet. So consider your where is number 2. Number 3 is budget. And this one often gets overlooked because as teachers, many times we're spending our own money to get things going, or we're like picking things up at the store to replenish and not really even thinking about it. But budget comes into play big time, especially when you do have things like 3D printers or robots of any kind. Because with the 3D printers, obviously if your students are using them, you're going to need the plastic filament to replace them. So where is that money coming from to be able to purchase new filament once it runs out? A lot of times parents are really good at donating consumable things like the toilet paper tubes and cardboard and cereal boxes and pizza boxes that aren't contaminated with food. But budget is something that is often overlooked, and I know that I overlooked it just because it wasn't at the forefront of my mind, and it was one of those things that I thought of kind of after the fact. When I did run out of things, like, and sometimes you have to close something for a little while, or, use your resources and think differently, so use something different. All important pieces of information. All right, number 4 is establishing a maker culture. So I find this one important because students are so used to performing for whether it be the test or an assessment within your classroom or the homework they have to turn in, whatever the case might be. But this whole maker culture is really important to develop because the students in this space need to know that this is kind of their space. It is their place to explore their own ideas. It's their space to mess up. It's their space to get messy. They are not needing to be perfect. And I think sometimes when kids first come to a makerspace, that piece is really hard for them because they think that they have to have something great by the end of it, or you're looking for something specific. But it's really important that you're establishing that culture of it's okay to fail. What do you do when you fail? You try again. Or you ask somebody like, hey, this didn't work the first time and I don't understand why. Can you help me? Like, all of those things are not only great skills for kids to learn, but it's important in this maker culture to know that all of those things are important, and that's really what it's all about and what you're trying to do. Okay, and last one, number 5. This is my favorite because this was me. So it is stop researching and do something. So I spent so much time reading about makerspaces, seeking out makerspaces to go and visit, digging into okay, well, what's this or what's that or how do I use this? Or I might get something and then say, ooh, I'm not quite sure how this works. Okay, well, I can't put that out because I don't know how to use it. No, 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 no. Just do it. If you have robots in a closet that you've never used before and you have no idea, other than maybe how to turn it on, what to do with it, put it out there, because the kids will figure it out in a half an hour, and then you can say to them, hey, teach me how to use that. I felt like that was one of the greatest experiences, not only for me, but for the kids, was that in a sense we were really learning together. So there were several things that we had in the space that I knew how to use, or I was familiar. I'd messed with it before, but I by no means had any in-depth knowledge about all of it. So it was always fun when the kids were like, oh, this is how this works, or can I show you something really cool, or I created this, and I'd say, oh my gosh, I didn't even know it could do that. So those are all things to consider. Now, I'm going to pause just a minute. This is the code. So in order for you to get your little certificate of completion, to get your hours, this is the code you need. Be sure that the E and the M are in capital letters because it is sensitive, cap lock sensitive. So my code is EM133. So I'm going to step out of the way just a second so that if you need that, you can write it down, do whatever. But that is the code to get your completion hours. I also want to remind you that on the day of Digital Learning Day, so February 27th, I will be in a live doc where you can ask questions about anything you may want to know. And you can find the times for all of these sessions on the Digital Learning Day website. Okay, so if you've gotten that code, I'm sure you have. Two more things I'd like to talk about really quickly. I love this quote from Piaget because I think sometimes as educators we forget this, but the principal goal of education in schools should be creating men and women who are capable of doing things, not just simply repeating what other generations have done. And I think that push is really, really important with these 21st century skills that are coming down the pike, because kids are really, really learning to be consumers of technology and the things around them, but they're not necessarily learning how to be the creators of these things. So we need to kind of shift that so that they are really going to be the ones that put things out there. And the last thing that I want to share with you are just some of my favorite things in the Makerspace. And I don't have pictures of them, but you can Google all of them. So some of my low-tech favorites are Kiva planks, which are just little wooden sticks. Brain builders are basically Kiva planks that come with cards that if you need, ideas for your kids of things they have to figure out how to build. The brain builders come with the cards and the planks. I love mag snaps or magnetiles. I'm sure you've seen them. They're just like plastic tiles with magnets in them that allows kids to build 3D structures and different things. Legos, and I know there's always a big debate about Legos and how creative they allow kids to be, but really if all they have are Legos and no directions, they kind of have to be creative. The other thing I really like are Connects. But with the little guys, like K through 2, they sometimes struggle to lock those ends together. Those are my favorite low-tech things. My favorite high-tech things would be the 3D printer, and it's not even really about the printing. I more liked them being able to design something. So we always use the online platform Tinkercad. And even if you don't have a 3D printer, and they can still get the practice of designing something three-dimensional using that design space. The other thing high-tech I like are the Ozobots. So it's a great little robot that's not too expensive, and it's a great introduction to coding for younger kids. So they use markers essentially to draw paths for Ozobot to follow, and then different series of colors create code or directions for little Ozobot to follow or do. I also really like, for little guys, if you're going to introduce them to coding, I love Codamouse or Bebot. He's cute too. But it gets them thinking of that coding mindset, like step-by-step process of following a path. And the other high-tech thing I would say that I like might be the Sphero. I like that option of, the kids having to use that coding to be able to create things using Sphero. Now, I will say I do like Little Bits, and many of you have probably heard of Little Bits. I always struggled with, sometimes the kids they had trouble getting them into things. Like they had like little platform things that the Little Bits would snap into to build like a car or whatever, and sometimes the kids had a real hard time getting those pieces in there. So I do love them, but the kids sometimes struggled with it. Another thing to think about that is tech-oriented but more on the creative side are things like stop motion animation. The kids love it. And if you have a tablet or some sort of device that you can download a stop motion animation app, there are free ones. And actually in my earlier session, that's what I talked about with stop motion animation in the classroom. So those are some things to consider. Also, think about the kids just being able to build structures out of cardboard. Plenty of people make little screws that you can, attach cardboard with, so that the kids are using tools to create structures that will hold together. You can also challenge them to create those structures without that luxury, make them make their own sort of connectors. But all of these things are great, and I really hope that if you're not already doing a makerspace, I hope that it's something you'll consider, because I think it's great for students just to have that freedom to explore their own interests. And a lot of times they don't not only get that now, but they also may not have the resources or the capabilities or the materials to be able to do so. So thanks for joining me today, and I will hopefully see you next time.